Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a 2005 Cadillac CTS with a 3.6 liter. Customer complaint is that the car doesn't start after filling up the fuel tank. The customer also stated that about 3 days ago the check engine light came on the dash, but this morning when he took it to the gas station to fill it up, the car wouldn't start. So he had to crank it several times to get the car to start. He got it to start, he went home, turned it off, and tried to start it back up. It wouldn't start, so it was still a crank no start. He had to crank it several times again to get it to start. So now he brought it here. So once the customer told me this, I already knew what the issue was, and I'm gonna show you how you can diagnose this issue without any fancy tools. You can use basic tools and diagnose this. So let's go inside the car. I will show you the check engine light first. Let's confirm the complaint, and then I will tell you how you can fix this yourself. So I am inside the car right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start it, and hopefully it's gonna start. I mean, it starts, but it just takes a long time to get it to start. And as you guys can see, the vehicle is cranking. Eventually it's gonna start, but it's just taking a little bit longer. And right there, the vehicle just started. So let's go under the hood and I'll show you how you can diagnose this and fix this quickly. So let's go under the hood. Alright guys, so I'm under the hood right now. I'm gonna show you what I just checked. And I already scanned this car. So the purpose of this video is I'm gonna show you how you can test this component I'm about to test in a few minutes without having any scan tool or without having any fancy diagnostic tools. You can do this test with basic tools, okay? So I'm gonna remove this engine cover, and the customer said that as soon as he filled up the fuel tank to the full, the car wouldn't start. So after filling up the fuel tank, it became a crank no start issue. He had to insist on the ignition so many times to get it to start. Okay, so once he said that, the first component I thought about was the purge valve. Think about it, the car was running fine, although the check engine light was on, but the car was running fine. And as soon as he filled up the fuel tank, it wouldn't start. So this here is most likely the issue. 90% of the time, this is the issue right here. The purge valve is part of the evap system. The evap system is a system that car manufacturers have designed to route fuel vapors from the tank to the engine so they can get burnt while the engine is running. And these fuel vapors are hydrocarbons, so we don't want to just let them out there in the air because they will pollute the air. So we have to find a way to route them back here to the engine so we can burn them. Okay, so this purge valve acts as the front door. So we technically have fuel vapors from the tank up to this tube right here, and this valve is a normally closed valve. The computer actually opens it whenever it wants to so that these fuel vapors can get routed inside the engine. Okay, so knowing that we have a crank no start just after the fuel tank gets filled, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna test this purge valve, because if this purge valve is stuck open, it's actually gonna cause the engine to run leaner. So because we'll have those fuel vapors coming in all the way inside the intake, and also we have a vent solenoid in the back near the canister. That solenoid is normally open, so it allows fresh air to get through the canister. And if this is stuck open, it's also going to allow that fresh air, pretty much unmetered air, getting inside the engine, which is going to make it run leaner, and eventually it's going to affect the idle and the engine performance. But remember, this is only happening after filling the fuel tank. Remember, I'm insisting on this because why isn't it doing it all the time? It's only doing it when the fuel tank gets filled. So this one, when it's damaged, when it's stuck open, it causes the engine to run lean. It also causes the engine to run rich. And I believe in this case, it's causing the engine to run rich. What's happening here is pretty much like, to those of you that know a little bit about carburetors, it's like flooding the carburetor. So the fuel vapors come all the way up to here, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there is raw fuel that comes all the way up to this point. And if this is stuck open, you have these fuel vapors working their way inside the engine. And if we have raw fuel up to here, what it's going to do? It's going to work its way inside the engine as well. And on the initial start, the ECM, this guy right here, the engine computer, actually opens the injectors a little bit longer. So it increases the injector pulse so that the fuel that's been delivered to the engine is going to be a little bit more, because on the initial start, we need a rich mixture to start the engine. So if this is stuck open, we're going to have the engine run super rich. So the engine is going to run really, really rich, which will cause it to not start, okay? So it's one of the two. It's either too much fuel vapors or excessive air inside the engine. But that would affect it all the time, though. It just wouldn't affect it while you fill up the fuel tank, okay? So one of the two. And so, again, I'm sorry if I'm being so repetitive here, but if your car doesn't start when you fill up your fuel tank, this is most likely the issue here. It's this component called the purge valve. You have to find the purge, every car nowadays have a purge valve. Just find where yours is. On this 2005 Cadillac CTS with a 3.6 liter, the purge valve is right here next to the battery. So what you need to do is you have to have the car running. So I'm gonna go inside the car, start it, and then I will show you what I'm gonna do. With the engine running, I'm gonna disconnect this line. You need to disconnect the line that's coming from the back of the vehicle, not the line that's coming from the intake. We have this line right here. We need vacuum at the purge valve, because with the car running, we have vacuum flowing through this tube right here. Remember, I said it's a normally closed valve. If I disconnect this line, we shouldn't have vacuum on this side. If we have vacuum coming out of here, it means this purge valve is stuck open, and then we have to replace it. And while you're checking that, you can also disconnect this electrical connector just to be 100% sure, because the computer might be commanding it open while you're doing your test. And if the computer is, that can be misleading. So I'm gonna go inside the car so that we can start it and test this purge valve. I'm sorry for the squeaky belt here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect this purge tube. The tube on the other side of the purge valve. I don't know if you can see here, but it's definitely pulling some vacuum. So the way I can test it is I have a vacuum gauge here that I can connect to the purge valve. So I'm gonna have you guys focus here on the gauge as I'm connecting it to the purge valve. And as you guys can see, our gauge is moving. So we shouldn't have any vacuum on the other side of the purge valve. And as you can see, I disconnected the electrical connector on the purge valve. And right there, this is the issue. Once I disconnect this line, our gauge is gonna go back to 0. And when I connect it back on the purge valve, actually the gauge is taking a little bit longer to read because the hose I have on the purge valve is a little bit bigger. But as you can see, we have vacuum on the other side of the purge valve. So right there, a defective purge valve, okay? So don't do that with the electrical connector connected to the purge valve, because the computer might be commanding it while you're doing your test, and that can be misleading, okay? So this is how you test your purge valve. I'm gonna go inside the car, turn it off so we can wrap up this video. All right, so I turned off the car, and here is the purge valve. And as you can see, I disconnected the line that's coming from the back of the vehicle. So that's where you do your test. And ideally, it's always good to do it with the wire, the electrical connector disconnected on the purge valve. Okay, so what you don't want to see is a vacuum on the other side of the purge valve. So you want the side that's coming from the intake to be connected, because we're using that vacuum coming from the intake to test the valve if it's stuck open. Usually they stick open. Sometimes they get stuck in the closed position, but most of the time they stick in the open position. And if your car doesn't start after filling up your fuel tank, this is most likely the issue. So I hope you like this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why, so we can make better videos in the future. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. And while you're down there, don't forget to ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Once again, thanks for watching. See you next time.